This is the Powered Up Podcast, show 42.
Basically, everybody in the class, I have two sections of business and bots. So everybody in the class works in the store. I have kids making TikTok videos. We have a TikTok channel. We have an Instagram. We have QR codes literally plastered all over the building in the hallways that if you go up and scan it, it brings you right to our Google site.
Welcome to a real-world education with insight and advice from teachers in the game, where current and former educators reveal what truly sets apart the great teachers and what it takes to make a positive impact on students. Whether you're in pre-service learning, new to the game, or a seasoned veteran, this is the show for you. You'll leave feeling inspired to take action because we are powering education by empowering you.
Hey, what's going on, everyone? This is Ken Ehrman, host of the Powered Up Podcast, and I am here with my co-host, as always, Mr. Matt, always putting a smile on his kids' faces, Rogers. I'm starting a little positive here, Matt, but I will say you are a teacher that I know, although I've never sat in your class when your students are there. I know all the stuff that you do to put a smile on their face, other than just making someone happy, which is a reason and enough. Why do you think it's so important for your kids to be happy when they're in your room?
Why? I usually wear stupid outfits so that I can make kids laugh and get away with it because I work at an elementary school. But
you also wear those outfits outside of school, even on days you didn't see kids. So
that's also true. They always talk about, like, if you get pulled over and you're wearing a onesie, like how embarrassing that would be. I think, to answer your question, right, like, we have a responsibility to engage kids in learning, to view school as an enjoyable place, to kind of mix challenge with the joy of growth. And it's hard to see hard work as joy. So I think showing a balance of having fun and being silly and ridiculous and just smiling and laughing is such an important part of teaching. I know as an adult, when Kristen, my wife, and I are kind of getting tense at each other, and something silly happens and it breaks the tension, how that is just a total stress relief. That kids come in with a lot of baggage. They have a lot of different layers to what's going on, that if you can greet them with some enjoyment, and not only does it signal a fun place to be, but a safe place to be and a place where they want to be, warmth, comfort, care, love, all those features are conveyed by being silly, being fun, being comfortable, being unique, being yourself. And if you model that, then that allows kids in any way they want to express themselves because they feel comfortable to do so.
Yeah, for me, it boils down to, it doesn't even apply to school. It's just like, why do you want to go somewhere and be miserable? Why don't you want to just go there and be, as happy as you possibly can be? Do some days suck as a teacher or as a student or as an employee of wherever you work? Absolutely. But, I would always try to take the approach of just focus on what you can control and just take it with a grain of salt. That question we ask on our exit ticket, what can you do to power up in those moments of struggle? It's just try to not sweat it. My colleagues would always say, like, do you ever get stressed? You never seem stressed. And I say, yeah, there's things that are stressful, but I don't dwell on it. I just focus on, what do I have to do today? What do I have to do tomorrow? And it keeps me in a happier place. And I wanted my students to feel the same way. I mean, I wanted them excited to come to my room as much as I possibly could. Did they enjoy everything we did? Absolutely not. But did they enjoy being in my room every day? I really believe so. And I really believe that I did as best as I possibly could to have as many as my students enjoy being there. There's a huge difference in enjoying being in a room and enjoying the individual activities, and you're never going to have both at all times. And I think the first part is more important. You know, like I said, there was activities, they would tell me things in my reading centers. Mr. Ehrman, I hate this reading center. It's boring every week. But you know what? It was a reading center that really hit home on some skills. And so it was going to be a part of it every week because it helped them learn. But they enjoyed the reading centers overall. They enjoyed the independence that I gave them, the trust and responsibility I gave them. And I just think that's so important. So our guest tonight, Matthew Strine, he talks a lot about just providing his kids with these incredible experiences that they frankly wouldn't have if it weren't for his class. And, you know, he talks overall about his journey through education and leaving and coming back, which I really appreciated that he shared and had a lot of insight in regards to that. But, you know, in his class that he has right now, he's creating experiences where I would be willing to bet, you know, all of the money we generate from this podcast, which is a whopping zero, but I'd be willing to bet a lot that his kids genuinely like being in his room, whether or not they enjoy every task that they have to do.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Before we talk about the guests, we did an episode right before the school year that talked about your main responsibility on day one is to make your kids so excited to come back for day two. And I've been thinking about that and that perspective, and I mean, whether it's day 30 at this point and making sure they're excited to come back for day 31, that's something that stuck with me this year. Times when I've been frustrated and challenged by a student or didn't like how I taught a lesson, those type of things, to shift that perspective to how I can go about it and make it better before the lesson's done, so that, you know what, it's not a complete wash. It's been something I found beneficial. And switching to our guests, right, Matt is teaching now, after many different variations of education and even non-education. I mean, Ken, I would say a dream class. There are some things that he gets to do that just embody like what seems to be grown-up versions of what we tried to do in the elementary classroom. I think our goal is to make his job really difficult at the elementary level, whereas he gets to take kids and their creativity and their interests to the next level. And so you get to hear about some of the programs, but also the purpose behind it all. He serves a population that it's very similar to the one that I teach in, that I'm sure there's a cycle of you go to school, and when you leave school, you have kids and you work in the town that you live in, and that those kids go to the same school, and they go through and continue to cycle through that environment that they're in. And not to make that judgment, but it's one of those things that he is creating opportunities. He talks about making it a priority to go to these big companies and see what opportunities they can provide, and big conferences, and take them out of their environment and really create a perspective that they could go and be something way more than even they think they can be, as long as they put the effort in.
Yeah, it's a great show. He provides a lot of insight in those areas, and a lot of different programs and opportunities that are out there, which are all linked up on our show notes page, which can be found at powereduup.com/show42. So without any further delay, let's bring in Matthew Strine. Hi, Matthew. Welcome to the Powered Up Podcast. How you doing today?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me on here. Truly appreciate it.
We're excited to launch in this conversation together. So why don't you start things off by just officially introducing yourself, kind of just what a snapshot of your education career has looked like so far and where you are coming from.
Sure, yeah. These days I call Monessen Middle/High School my home. I am officially the STEM teacher there. I teach 6th through 12th grade every day. So I see 3 middle school classes and 3 high school classes. The way I've kind of described my career is I've kind of went around the bases once, and I guess I've started lap 2, if you will, but I don't think I'm going to take it much further than first base this time. So I started as a fourth grade teacher out of state in Virginia, and then I came back to Pittsburgh, which I've for the most of my life called home. Started teaching second grade, became a district level technology coach. Then I created a position for myself and became a director of instructional technology for a district. I went on from there to become a K-8 principal. So I did that for 5 years, which is the longest I had been in any stint at that point. And then honestly, I was burnt out and I left education for about 2 years, kind of trying to find myself, and I ended up in the financial sector in corporate America, and that was not for me. So I'm back in the classroom, and that's where I intend to stay for the for the time being. But you just never know. So
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really interesting journey, and I appreciate you sharing that. What would you say was what was it that led to your burnout that forced you to, take that break from education? Do you think it was that position as an administrator, or if you had stayed in the classroom or stayed in different positions, do you still think you would have reached that, and what have you learned from that?
yeah, I mean, I'll be honest. Looking back on it, if I had never went to the principal position, I would likely still be the director of instructional technology. I would imagine at this point there would be the word innovation attached to it, just because that's what they do now. But yeah, I think it was, it was interesting because I left the classroom. Actually, I guess I skipped a step in there. I left the classroom after 3 years and became a technology coach. This was still down in Virginia. And then I was back in the classroom for 2 years when I left again. And when I became the director of instructional technology, my wife reminds me of this, at least, that I had some discussions about the idea that I felt like I wasn't impacting students as much. And then I went into the principal role thinking that was going to be, I guess, a different level of impact than it was. Most of my career, I've been working in an urban setting. So I've seen some challenges, to say the least. And I think the burnout just came from, just dealing with a lot of discipline. Where I was teaching, we were a at-will employer, so it was a charter school. I was with the organization for 9 years. There was a lot of turnover just because, a lot of reasons. If you could get a job with a local district and have a union on your side, that makes a big difference for a lot of people, especially young teachers looking to start families. But yeah, I mean, it was not for a lack of effort. I mean, there's a whole nother side of me that we're not going to get into tonight, I'm sure. But I tell this story, and the way I tell my story is that I would sometimes be in my building until 2 a.m. I would come home, I would sleep on the couch so as not to wake anyone up upstairs. And I'd sleep for about 3 hours, and I'd get up and do it all over the next day. And personally now, I'm 40 years old now, and I'm looking back and I'm thinking, like, that was very, very unhealthy, in many different, definitions of the term. So yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, that's what burnout is you just don't feel you can do it anymore. And yeah, I kind of left with no plan in mind, but yeah, I mean, I'm really glad to be back where I'm at today.
So, fellow Matt, I think honestly, there's a few ways that we can go with this. I'm honestly excited because I think we as educators are terrible about setting boundaries, and what you just said is the true definition. I think we've all been in those positions, and I think one thing that I'm grappling right now as an educator is I spent the last 18 years trying to pare down what I did in my classroom because I knew that my hours were much wider. Like, for instance, in virtual teaching and pandemic teaching, if a parent's email me at 6:30 in the morning and another at 9:30 at night, and they're putting the effort into get in contact and do good by kids, I feel like it's my responsibility to reach out to them and be available. And that's well beyond our contracted hours. And that was really tough to balance, in addition to pump up videos and creating engaging lessons and additional materials for kids that are quarantined. So I think we're kind of coming out of, hopefully, that idea of doing the bare minimum to survive. I know my district is still very supportive of do what you need to, like whatever you feel like you can handle right now. But there's going to be a point where we get back to the extracurriculars and the things that we've always said yes to, and those type things that have had us all at school until 9, 10, 11 o'clock at night, preparing for or cleaning up from. That's the beauty of it in some ways, but I can't tell you that I'm ready for it right now. And I think boundaries is a big portion that any way that if I remember when I first started teaching, a similar story. I was at school and the janitorial staff kicked me out because I moved somewhere brand new. I didn't know anyone. And it was like, why would I go home? I had internet here. I didn't at home. Like, it was a rough situation. I might as well stay there, and the building was heated. My apartment was less so. So, like, all that to be said, like, we can reflect and say, hey, things were not great, or we made choices that were not great. What is that balance right now? What have you gained from your experience to say, hey, this is healthy? This is, because I can get sucked right into pushing too far the moment I say yes for the first time.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest. I think so. You have to realize I worked in Virginia for 5 years. I came back to Pittsburgh. I worked for a charter school for 9 years. So the first 14 years in education for me, I was not part of a union. And I will tell you, I've seen it in, my wife is a teacher. I know many educators in this area. Um, I feel like it's almost a work smarter, not harder mentality. I feel like I'm doing just as much work as ever. But I am. I'm turning it off. I turn it on my drive in and start to think about anything I want to change, for the day's plans. And then on the way home, I kind of reflect on it. But I have 3 children. I have a first grader, a fifth grader, and a ninth grader. My freshman in high school, she's on the varsity soccer team, and I make it a point she plays Monday and Wednesday nights, and I've been to every game this season. But I think I'm just kind of able at this point in my life just to sit back and say I can get a lot done while I'm here. One of the things that I feel like I can do now, especially being when I taught before, it was mostly at the elementary level. But now at the middle and high school level, I really try to empower the students so that there might be things in the past that I would say, oh, I have to do this myself. And now it's like, yep, it's on you. My students run a business, two of my classes. It's called Business and Bots. And I basically, have shown them and discussed with them how a business works and what I feel like is going to be efficient and effective ways to do this. But at the end of the day, I don't feel bad if somebody doesn't get their product when they want it, because I tell them it's not me running the business, it's the students, it's my classes. So yeah, I don't know. I think I'm just working just more efficiently at this point. I'll be honest, just based on the hours. I leave home at 6:30 in the morning to get there by 7, and then. Just the way things are at this point, I need to be home to get my youngest off the bus at 3:45. So yeah, it's definitely just looking at the bigger picture, realizing that I can do what I can for the students at Monessen while I'm there. I take my kids. I've taken my younger 2 a couple times this year to the football games to go support the students in their extracurricular activities. but yeah, it's different, and I think part of the thing about being a principal was I felt like everything came back to me, and whether or not even that was the case, that was just kind of the mentality I took on, um, and I yeah, I just look at things a lot differently at this point.
Yeah, that's really understandable in it, and it's a battle that we face as teachers. We face, like you're sharing it, as parents as well. I've definitely felt that differently since I've started to have my own kids as well. I want to dig in real quick to what you're talking about with empowering your students. That's something that I've always and Matt knows this. I've always been passionate about. I was very focused on trying to get my students to take as much leadership and as much charge in their classroom. At times it looked like I was trying to get them to do everything so I didn't have to do anything, but that really was the goal as much as possible. So what I would like you to try to do is share some specific strategies or things that you do in your classroom to build your students up to have that capacity, and then also try to perhaps kind of reflect on the fly. If you went back to fourth grade, how would you take some of those strategies and bring that same mentality to a fourth grade classroom? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, empowering. I don't know. They're just, the way I look at it sometimes is, for decades it's been the achievement gap, and then it was the opportunity gap. But I look at one that isn't maybe touched on as much, and I call that one the reality gap. It's just the idea that yes, there's programs out there. I mean, there's different programs that some of my students will have access to that other students won't, simply because we're in a Title I building. Um, but the reality is, how I try to empower them is basically bring those opportunities to them, and then do everything I can to encourage them to make the most of those opportunities. So, for instance, I mean, just a small thing, but whenever I came on at Monessen, they were using a certain computer science curriculum. And I'm not saying it wasn't of value, it just, I don't feel like it was the most empowering one. I felt like it was a lot of, script in terms of do this and do this. And I've latched on to the Amazon Future Engineer program. I mean, I had to go through an interview for that to get the school accepted. But it's one of those things that, tomorrow, for instance, we have I'm not even sure, honestly, the type of engineer, but somebody from Amazon is going to be talking to my class, my computer science class, in the afternoon. But it's just things like, Amazon, obviously, they're a big contender on pretty much every stage. But through this program, and again, this is only offered to certain school districts, the students can ultimately apply for a $40,000 college scholarship and also a paid internship through Amazon. So last year, I only started using the program midway through the year whenever I, was approved and able to pull the plug on the other one and move forward. But I mean, I had a student that, he was really hoping for something beyond high school, and we got to the point where we actually sat down, and only realized at that point that he wasn't meeting the criteria in terms of the GPA requirement to apply for this. But the thing is I almost, in a sense, recruited students to come to this class this year. I look at it as, if I can find students that I can make the difference in motivating a little bit, get them involved, and then early on talk about these opportunities, so that these aren't just things where you go on Amazon Future Engineer site and you see these 100 scholarship winners. I fully intend to have one at my school, and that's the case with a lot of the things we do. Is I'm trying to bring these things into the building so that it just becomes more of the norm and not the exception. So from empowering students, there are a lot of opportunities out there, but I feel like they don't often enough maybe make it into the hands of the actual individual, and they kind of sit at a surface level, even with administrators or coaches and whatnot. But that's where, we just have very transparent discussions every day about, this is something you could do. Empowering as well. You mentioned the fourth grade thing. So one of my classes that I teach, we do battle bots. So to me, to do battle bots, you need battle bot equipment. And where I'm at in my building is actually the old wood shop. So, using Donors Choose, I was able to get $4,500 worth of welding equipment into my classroom. So, scale that down to a fourth grade level. I think a lot of the things that I'm doing now with this business and the 3D, it's basically a 3D print and t-shirt making business with a Cricut. I think I would be able to probably make that happen at a fourth grade level. I would probably have to be a little bit more hands-on. And, the reality is my sixth graders are using some of these same things. And they're not, too far removed. I guess their last real year of school was fourth grade. So, yeah, I definitely, I often I don't, I guess, take no for an answer when a student, if I bring something to them, I'm like, no, like, I know, you just have to trust me. I've been doing this for a while. Yeah, and I share so many personal stories about, so I was actually, up until a week before I went to undergrad school, I was going to be a civil engineer. And a lot of things happened my senior year that led me to decide I'm not going to do that with my life. And there were a lot of people kind of suggesting that maybe I go into education. So yeah, literally a week before I left for Penn State, I changed my major from civil engineering to elementary education. But I tell students that because I explain to them, like, you don't have to know today what you're going to do, but it's, the work ethic. It's taking these opportunities that I'm showing you and making the most of them because you can. Not, I'm just going to let somebody else go out and win this thing or do this. I explained to the students, like, I'm going to bring you everything that's out there. I fortunately have a lot of connections at this point in my career just because of the many stops I've made along the way. So yeah, I'm just always looking to give them a better chance to make that reality theirs. So it's not just, I heard about these kids. These kids are probably, really smart kids. No, they're exactly like you, and like your name will be there before you know it. We just have to, work at it and, believe that it's the right thing for you. And I think that's where, regardless of them in fourth grade or middle school, high school, it all comes down to trust. And I'm like an open book with my students. So yeah, they know everything going on in my life and everything that's gone on in my life. They've heard the whole story of, yeah, I was making six figures as a principal, and now I make 50% of that. So yeah, I'm yeah. Go ahead.
No, sorry. I think you hit on two really important things about making it real and it actually like being real and not, real world where it's like kind of supposed to be like, no, it's a real business that you're actually running, and the part of trust. And when you bond those two together, the students really do feel empowered. That's the thing that they're feeling. And just to insert, you talked about possibly doing it with your fourth graders. When I was teaching fifth grade, I had my kids running a business that kind of spawned out of nothing. I won a grant. We won a 3D printer. We figured out how to use it together, and we had some ideas for projects to make and things to do. And I came to the realization that I didn't have enough filament. And so I could have easily just gone on Amazon and bought a couple rolls, but I posed it to the kids like, we're going to run out of material. How can we raise more money? And it spawned into a couple-hour conversation, and they had the typical fifth grade responses like have a lemonade stand, they had all these different ideas. And someone said, why don't we charge people to use the printer? And so that kind of spawned, and it became obvious that wasn't realistic to charge people to use it. But then someone said, like, what if we print stuff and sell it? And so it turned into them designing keychains for the school. We had never had a school store, so they actually made a presentation to the principal to get permission. I had talked to him beforehand, just, I think it's important to do that so you're not putting your principal in a bad position. But but he was totally all for it. And it went to the extent of them making designs. They made coupons for every student for the first day of sale. They spent a day, 2 kids spent the entire day in lunch modeling the keychains to get people excited about it. So, when we got to the point where it was like, we're ready to do this, I said to them, you need to have inventory on your first day of sale. We had about 450 kids in the school. They said, let's make 200. And I said, if we make 200, you will have 0 filament left. This is it. And if we don't sell any, we're done. Like, this is, do you want to do it? And they all wanted to do it. The first day of school, they sold out in about 20 minutes, and they took orders for another 200 of them. They sold like probably close to 1,500 keychains in 2 months to the school. And all the money it really helped build up like a 3D printing program in the school. The following year, student leadership took over the funds, and they bought a water bottle filling station for the hallway. So it all went towards the school and to buy, more supplies. But, they were giving up all of their lunches, all of their recesses. We had a sales team, we had a marketing team, we had a production team. That piece of trust and being real. They were counting dollar bills. Like, it couldn't have been more real than it was. And Matt took a similar spin after he saw what happened in my school, and his was more focused on support. Was it a local charity that you did it for? Or?
Yeah, our school partners with a local charity specifically. So all the funds each year would go towards one of their major projects. So we had a Girls in STEM program run by our guidance counselor that I came in and supported in much the same way, kind of stealing some of the concepts from Ken. But as you're saying, yeah, can you pare it down to a 3rd, 4th grade level? Absolutely. Am I the only one that touches a 3D printer? Absolutely. 200 degrees Celsius, I don't think so.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a little bit different when you push up into those higher grades, but the management, they're going into the classrooms. Each kid was assigned a homeroom. They would take orders, they'd collect money, they would do the marketing, and then they got to present it at the end. And it's something we were able to do up until COVID. So we had kids selling a unique keychain for every single school year. So we had a kindergartner that went through every single year and had a new keychain designed by one of the girls specifically. It had to be designed by them. We would give feedback. We'd have the teachers vote on it, and some basic guidelines. But it's really neat to see once it's up and running. It's a lot of work to get that point. I'm sure you guys would all agree. But once it's up and running, it is seamless. And the impact of it seems almost... Sometimes I found myself being like, oh, this is no big deal. And then when I realized the curricular skills, but also the maturity and the development that goes along with it, I think that's what, when we all talk about STEM, it's development of humans so much more as problem solvers, identifying weakness, seeking improvement, and working together. That is the addictive part of including STEM in our environments. I'd love to pose a question, because as a classroom teacher, my kids go to an awesome STEM teacher, Mr. Swords. He goes, has 40 minutes one time a week, and they talk about coding and they talk about digital citizenship, and there is some design projects that they're trying to create kind of collaborative designs to accomplish a problem, but it's a tough sell, much like art class, much like music, much like phys ed, how those become lifelong skills. But I would imagine that as it becomes a requirement at the elementary level and into a interest that you can kind of expand upon as an elective and maybe a course of study, how does that program intensify? Because as you're talking about it, you're looking to make it the expectation that we have someone that qualifies for that Amazon grant. What are you doing to facilitate and recognize? It seems like you recognize that you may only have a handful of kids that dive completely in, kind of like you have a handful of kids that go to AP Art and History because they intend to study that beyond. You're capitalizing on that creativity. So how much time are you selling kids on, hey, this is a possibility, compared to kind of like tamping down excitement and getting too into the weeds on your own?
Yeah, it's interesting because we only have 2 buildings in the district. So we have a K through 5 elementary center, I don't think I've ever stepped in it. Now, you have to realize I've only been with the district for, I guess it's been about 21 months now. Um, but I honestly don't know too much about what goes on there in terms of, STEM. Um, but it's nice that I have 6th through 12th grade because they all see me all the middle school students see me for 9 weeks. So I have 6th graders. They come in, their class was, traditionally had been tech ed. And basically, tech ed at this point is we're online, we're using Tinkercad, we're using, SketchUp. We are designing while simultaneously taking classes through Tooling U to learn about machines that when it's their time to use these machines, because, yeah, I mean, being in a wood shop, it's plenty convenient. I have a drill press. If we want to make, something that wasn't maybe intended to be a keychain into a keychain, we just put a hole in it. And, we have belt sanders, for instance, where, if it was a rough print, you could kind of fix it up a little bit and still get away with putting it on the shelf. I mean, we have quality control for sure. But it's nice because, getting the students in 6th grade, I start to teach them about, again, these opportunities. Then I see them in 7th grade, and I have what I do is basically the first half of a project lead the way curriculum. So we're using automation and robotics. So 7th grade, it's, kind of getting into more of the nitty gritty of how these things work and why this stuff matters. And then I get them again in 8th grade, and it's okay, hands-on, like every day. We're making claw bots as we speak. Like that's what's going on in my class this week. But what's really neat is now having been there all year last year and now this year is, like I said, I mean, I sent out emails through our platform. I sent messages through Schoology and basically told some students, like, I'd really like to see you come take one of my high school courses. So I want to say in my business and bots class, I want to say I have about half of the kids are freshmen. You mentioned, Ken, your store sounds so much like mine in so many ways. But I have a 9th grader. He comes down. I mean, he's never really been invited, but I'm not going to turn him away. But he comes down every lunch period, and he just prints. We have this big board, the drawing board, and he just sees what needs printed. He prints them and he hangs them up where the pickup station is. But yeah, I mean, that gives them then an opportunity to. So my business and bots class, it is basically what I consider. You take automation robotics from what they learned in middle school, and you put it up quite a few notches, and they are making battle bots for a local. It's called Bots IQ. But last year was the first year that Menneson ever participated in it. So now this year, what I realized last year was some students just weren't as interested in the BattleBots part. So I figured I needed to find something else. So I'm not sure if you've heard of Project Invent, but I became a fellow this year. So I have now basically everybody in the class. I have 2 sections of business and bots. So everybody in the class works in the store. I have kids making TikTok videos. We have a TikTok channel. We have an Instagram. We have QR codes literally plastered all over the building in the hallways that if you go up and scan it, it brings you right to our Google site. And it has all the contact information and all the social media feeds there. So everyone's doing the business because, I mean, part of my credential is the business education. But the other part, they kind of get to choose. So they choose, are they going to go the advanced robotics and learn more about metal working and welding? Or are they going to do Project Invent? And Project Invent is basically the idea of you partner with somebody in your community. And community can obviously be defined however you want it to be. But you partner with somebody and you invent something for them. So it's really, it's a great concept. I don't even remember how I stumbled upon it, but I'm so glad I did. I had training over the summer, but these students are working with The one class, they're working with an individual with a brain disease who's wheelchair bound. And basically, through Zoom meetings, they're going to find out over the coming months what we can do for him. So, hopefully in the end, we can prototype something and get feedback from, the people that are involved with the program. And ideally, again, opportunity. So I think there's probably about 120 teams across the nation this year. Well, 8 teams get a full, all expenses paid trip to San Jose to actually pitch to investors. And I'm the kind of person that from day one has told my students, this might be your only chance to get to San Jose anytime in the near future. Let's make the most of this. And, I tell them, get on Twitter, follow these people. Like, they're going to notice things that you're doing that other people aren't doing. Even if we don't make the product, this individual, he's in a wheelchair, and one of the things that he said the first time we Zoomed was, I'd like to walk again. That's a big undertaking for high school students. It really is, but I we have a sign in the makerspace, and it's the sky's the limit. I really do believe, with plenty of discussion with this individual, we can do something really, really neat. So the thing that's really cool about that is I can technically have the students take my class multiple times because they're actually doing something different each time. So even if they're working on a different bot, or if they're working on a different, with a different community partner, so there's that. And then back to the coding side of things, I introduced, this year is the first full year with the Amazon Future Engineer, so we have Intro to Python. But my hope is, just because of the work, level in terms of what I'm having to do for the bots and the project Invent, I'm trying to make it so that next year we have just one offering of that, one of Intro to Computer Science, and then I'm hoping to offer a section of AP Computer Science, because again, that's another opportunity. And it's not that I don't like having 2 of the classes. It's just, it's a lot of work, and they're probably the messiest of the group in terms of coming into a space and absolutely doing everything that they need to in 41 minutes, and then me trying to pick up the pieces and get ready for the next class 4 minutes later. So yeah, I think it's been nice because I've been able to see students now in middle school and know that they don't have to see me anymore after 8th grade. And, some teachers would be like, yes, that's fantastic. And some teachers are going to be like, listen, I will do whatever it takes to get you in my class. I had a student, I didn't even meet the student last year. She was online all year. And just her work ethic alone was enough for me to send her a message through Schoology at one point. The school year starts this year and she's not in my class. So I'm just, what happened? What went wrong? I sent her another message and said, I noticed you weren't on any of my rosters. Next thing I know, she transferred into my class like the second week of school, and has been a huge, huge part of getting everything off the ground as smoothly as it is at this point. I guess we're about 6 weeks in now. So yeah, I don't want to say I handpick people, but having been in the position for about 6.5 years where I was the boss and I was bringing people on, I'm giving students what I consider to be a real eye-opening and very empowering opportunity to learn about something that is absolutely employable, these skill sets that they're going to learn. And I don't know. So far it's worked in my favor, as opposed to just having students go to the elective class because that's all that was left. So yeah, it's me taking a different approach now, and that's from the ground up to change a culture. Is honestly what I'm trying to do, is get it so that the students. We have several AP offerings, and I would say probably not a single student in any of my classes right now is in an AP course. Uh, so I think I want to kind of flip the script and get them to realize what's going on. Um, down in the makerspace, and figure out how to get more students involved. Um, yeah, and I mean then that's where again from there it can become more of the norm. And I know our art teacher already has been able to obtain a Cricut and a 3D printer herself. Um, but honestly, we talked about the 3D printing and the business side of things. Like, you want real world math, make them run a business. I mean, that's how I approached it with my principal. Was, well, if I'm supposed to teach them how to run a business, then we're just going to do that. We're going to run a business. Teach them about business concepts. We're going to run a business. So yeah, I know that was a long-winded response, but I tend to get long-winded when I'm talking about things that excite me. And that's where now I say, they say if you enjoy what you're doing, you're never going to work a day in your life. I don't feel like I'm working at this point, so it's refreshing for sure.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the answer, and like you said, you're passionate about it, you're excited about it. I'm maybe sometimes long-winded. Matt's constantly long-winded.
Thank you,
my
appreciate
co-host.
it.
He'll go on forever and ever, right, Matt?
Unfortunately.
No. I mean, we're talking shop here. We're passionate educators. We've both always been involved in STEM as well, so we love everything that you're sharing. And I think it's important to highlight how you are creating these experiences for kids. You're thinking about what's best for them. You talked about having your sights set on San Jose. I think one of the worst things we can do as educators is not set really high expectations and high goals for our kids, because when you keep those low expectations, you're setting a low bar for them. And I will pride myself in saying that most of the students usually enjoyed my class and were excited to come to my classroom. But I worked those kids really hard. I had extremely high expectations for them, and I wanted them to know what they were potential of. And I also paired it with a high level of support. And as long as you're creating an environment where you do have those high expectations for kids, but you're also bringing in a high level of support, that's where you get those win-win situations, and you're opening their eyes up to situations that they really may never even have thought of before. I know your community you shared with me before is much more rural, especially kids in those environments, tough urban environments where they don't travel much. They don't, excuse me, they don't see much with their families. Getting that idea of traveling somewhere, winning a scholarship, all those different components, they might not even think that's possible before they hear that from you, someone that they respect and they look up to. But I actually want to ask you to provide maybe some insight and suggestions to our educators listening. You're talking about your business, and is the class actually called Business and Bots?
Yes. Yes.
That's an awesome name.
That officially made it into the curriculum guide for for this year, the framework.
I don't know how kids aren't signing up for a class called Business and Bots just to begin with. But so, you talked about how some kids weren't into the battle bots. So you started adding these different components where they could explore robotics in your classroom. And from my perspective, that sounds like one, great differentiation and personalization to your students, but a lot to manage. Do you have any suggestions for how you're able to manage so many students doing so many different things in this 41 or 42 minute class period that you have?
I mean, it is a lot, from the idea of, if I'm already teaching 5 different classes a day, why would I basically split one into 2 and add another one? But yeah, I don't know. I mean, the reality is a lot of these things, have similar objectives. So it's kind of, I can spin this lesson this way for this group and spin it, a little differently for another group. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I definitely have a lot of charts in the room where there's names of students, and this is what your job is for the time being. And Yeah, I mean, fortunately, it's not the biggest class. I think the bigger of my two classes has maybe 14 students. The other one's probably right around there, 12, 13 maybe. Um, yeah, I don't know because, again, whenever I talk about this idea of it not being work, so I come in and, we have planning period every day to start the day. So we have about 45 minutes to you know, get everything down. And honestly, at that point, I'm pretty much cleaning up from prints that were going overnight. Um, I've had some students come down at that point. Then I go up to breakfast duty. So I'm in the cafeteria. I'm constantly talking to students. If students want things ordered, I send them down at that point. I just basically tell them where the board is and what they need to do. Um, it's manageable with a smaller school. I would imagine if this was a bigger school, I'd probably be enlisting more support, especially from colleagues. But I mean, I feel like right now what I'm just trying to do is just again get people to think a little bit differently about what is possible. You think about a plane ride across the country. That's the best geography lesson you could ever give a student. I don't care what you can do in the classroom. Just put them on a plane and send them somewhere, and then have them fly back. And you know, but yeah, I mean, management wise, I'm not gonna say it's not a lot of work, but again, it's work that I'm fully invested in, and I have relationships with the table that I typically sit not sit down with, but kind of stake as my claim at breakfast duty is basically where all the football players sit. And I have several of them in my class, and again, it's all about relationships, and just doing things that get their attention. And but yeah, I mean, it's manageable again because I have so many students working. I mentioned QR codes around the building. I didn't create the QR code. All I did was hit copy on the printer so that they could take their copy and put them all over the building. I don't have Instagram myself, so I wouldn't even know how to do that. So I have two of the girls in the class that love Instagram, and I said, have at it. Go create this, and I will put it out there to try to get you followers, because that's something I know enough to do. And same with TikTok. For a hot minute, I did have a TikTok account, but what else were you to do in quarantine? So yeah, it was like the start of a pandemic, and I'm just like, well, I'll check this out. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of student leaders stepping up and doing these things. And I have a student that came last year. So just to talk about growth, last year our BattleBot team consisted of two students. One was a senior and one was a freshman. And the senior has obviously moved on at this point, but the freshman's back in my class again, and he's now a student ambassador. So he's actually learning directly from the people at the program, and then he's bringing that learning back to his classmates and everything. And again, I think it's for as much as I'm doing, I think you both hit upon this. There's so much that the students are doing, and there were so many students last year, and I think this was more so when they weren't seeing kind of the fruits of their labor. Where right now, yeah, I mean, we print customized keychains every day, and they see them going in and out the door, and the money coming in, and we're getting a cash register, and we're getting an open sign so that we can have the light on, and all that stuff. But I think last year I heard a lot of the students say, like, this is a really tough class, but life's tough, so you need to be prepared for it. And I feel like that's what I'm doing, as well as really setting students up for whatever life throws at you. You're going to know how to again use these soft skills that you can't measure on a test. I will tell you, I've never been a fan of standardized tests. I was the principal that literally would stand in front of my staff and say, look, we all know that when you're in your 30s, you're not going to be talking about your test scores. teach what you need to teach, make a difference in these students' lives, and we'll let the test scores be what they are. They're test scores. So, I mean, I'm not really a giver of homework at this point. I don't really give tests because there's so many other opportunities to learn and get students to, I had a very similar conversation with a student, and basically he was like, we need to know exactly how much filament we're using, lengthwise on everything we sell. And fortunately, we found out that our 3D printer actually measures it every single time. So now he's, figuring out, how to make revenue on it, and what we have to charge basically per inch. And but again, these aren't lessons you're going to find ever in a textbook. It's just not going to happen. So yeah, I mean, I guess part of what helps me manage it is just the idea that I was out there in the business world. I was doing sales. I was doing life insurance sales. I was doing really well. And I was making better money than I make now. But but yeah, having that background, I can say, like, one of the biggest things that has changed about my approach is being out in the business world, even for 2 years. There's so much money out there. So I went after the money last year. I probably wrote 40 grants, and I had 7 that I did receive, and I got $21,000 worth of equipment out of it. So that's the one thing that I would say to any teacher out there. I don't care if it's your first week teaching, your first day teaching. There's money out there, and there are people that, I explain to students what tax write-offs are and how they benefit, the company. They're paying less in taxes. They're looking great in the public's eye. And it impacts classrooms. And that's where I've, really, really spent a lot of time finding those money sources and bringing things in here that really, when I came to the building in January of 2020, there were no 3D printers. We have 9 at this point. And, it's just, again, it's becoming the norm. Like, I'm out of space almost, so my students work at tables, and I told the students that the front 2 tables in the room are just going to have 3D printers in the middle of them, because that way I can manage it while I'm teaching. So if I need to be the one to switch a filament roll, I can do it right there from the front of the classroom while I'm just doing everything else.
So I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit, and I know that great educators struggle with an answer like this. So I'm going to steal also from our lesson lens, Ken, just a little bit. But this program that you're running is kind of in that infantile stage, that it's kind of brand new in your hands. And I am sure you do some incredible things between all of the offerings that you have, but where would you want to see this program in the next 5-10 years? Because everything we're hearing is practical and the soft skills that they need to learn. How can you amplify it even more? Where would you like to see it grow, that it continues? Like, I know, to steal an answer, obviously, like, if you could fulfill that Amazon grant on the regular, or donations, what are ways that you think that in your role you can, I think, provide new opportunities for kids, but also continue at an even more grand level, lead kids to their potential future career?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I did, I mean, again, if I said that I wrote 40 grants and I received 7, that means there were 33 that I did not receive. There is a pretty significant community here in the Pittsburgh area called Remake Learning. They actually put out for these Moonshot Grants. They had 2 rounds. They had one in the spring. They had one in the fall. I applied both times. I took feedback from the first denial and wrote a new proposal. I talked to the folks at Project Invent and basically asked them if I could use certain resources they have and their Creative Commons license, so they were absolutely fine with it. And I still didn't get the grant, but what I would like to see is, I think everyone, every community has a story. I mean, Monessen is part of the Rust Belt, which is as glorious as it sounds. You know, there was obviously Pittsburgh in general, lots of steel mills, don't exist now. Monessen one of these kind of forgotten towns. A former president of ours did a campaign stop in Monessen years ago, and basically said, like, this is the type of town that I want to reinvent. Not much came of that said president's work regarding this town, but I'd like to think that I can find people in town that, you know, can almost make some of these things a reality in-house. What I was shooting for with the Moonshot Grant, play on words intended, was the idea of basically students, before they ever do Project Invent, it's more teacher assisted invention program. But basically the students can win internally a scholarship. So not only does it kind of, you know, get them excited for the idea of something beyond high school because there's money waiting for them, it also retains students, because we're in a world now where we have a lot of choice. Again, being an employee of a charter school system for 9 years, I saw it all the time. But I think what I'm going to, you know, hope to see in 5-10 years is that we're doing things at a community level that are directly impacting the students. A lot of the students that, you know, graduate from Monessen stay in Monessen. And I don't think there's a problem with that at all. I think it's just, you know, if we want this city to look different in 10 years, we need to do something about it now. So I think just continuing to find partners, you know, sometimes it is going to take a bigger name like Amazon to, you know, make it happen. But I think there's a lot of people in town that we can certainly work with and learn from, and you know, do things together.
Yeah, it supports the school, it supports your classroom, helps win more grants and bring more.
I had a
junior
guy
support
message me
involved.
on Facebook Messenger the other day, and he's actually a local guy where I live, and I only work 25 minutes from here. But he was like, "Oh, I'm a member of the Italian club in Monessen. If you ever want to go grab a beer and eat some wings, I can meet, or I can introduce you to some people." I'm like, "Absolutely! Like, who wouldn't want to do that?" So.
Yeah, no better way to bring in funds than, you know, the Italian mob or, you know, that the Italian club that's going to help support. But yeah, I mean, anybody that's going to help support the students and provide something better that's going to give them a more positive experience is worth exploring. And you know, my fantastic co-host here, Matt, he's done a great job of curating grants over the years, and I've gotten a couple, not nearly as much as either of you, but you know, a lot of people don't apply for them, and if they do and you don't get it, great, you just turn it around and you send it out to another one, or you save it for next year. You know, bring the students involved, get them involved in the writing process, and you know, empower them on how you found them. Maybe they can find more. You know, the more hands on deck you have for it, the more support you're going to be able to curate for that. So I do want to transition into our next segment, or our first, you know, closing thing that we do, called the lesson lens, to learn more about a unit, a topic, or a single lesson that you do in your classroom. So the first question, is it a unit overview, a long-term project, or a single lesson?
It's really a single lesson.
All right. If you could specify the grade level, I think subject area might be pretty obvious, but grade level that you really target, and time of year if it's time of year specific.
It is 7th grade, so because, again, it's at the middle school level, I see a different group. Basically, by the time the year's over, I'll see them all through the 4 quarters. But it's usually about a third of the way through their quarter, so about 3-4 weeks in is when I teach this specific lesson.
Okay. What are the objectives for the lesson?
Yeah, the objectives are twofold. It's basically the idea to learn how to write detailed directions and then how to follow detailed directions. So the students, this is actually kind of taken out of the Project Lead the Way, automation and robotics. Whenever they started talking about automated systems, the students, I give them one of two options. I let them either write the steps to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, or I give them the opportunity to make a ham and cheese sandwich. Um, I give them this opportunity because obviously in today's world we have to be aware of peanut allergies, uh, but more so because I think a lot of times we assume a lot of things about just basic things like a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and that might not be common in somebody's household. So I like to at least give them another option. Um, but yeah, there's then a part of the lesson where I follow their directions, which is absolutely hysterical in many regards. But then they, answer comprehension questions about, did the teacher do what you expected? What was different? What do you think's easier, following directions or writing directions or explaining something? Um, so yeah, that's what the lesson is.
Beautiful. Um, I guess so. You kind of talked about what the students are actively doing as well as what you're doing by acting it out. How do you take advantage of their responses be to really make it a teachable moment? Because I think the whole concept is if you can exaggerate their misstep, that makes them know that they need to be more explicit. How do you take it from fun and silly, or maybe even discouraged and upset because they didn't get it right, and turn it into a teachable moment?
Yeah, I mean, I have a lot of props, being in the space that I'm in. So, when it says open the jar of peanut butter and I pull out a hacksaw and cut it in half, students are just, first just floored. They're like, what is wrong with my teacher? But it gets down to the nitty gritty of what computer science is. It's teaching computers, how to do things. And if you think, as a human, yeah, we can figure it out and we have this thing called common sense, well, computers don't. And that's where we get into then, some of the different, facets of coding, and how a computer is just literally reading ones and zeros. Um, and it's something I even revisit in my intro to computer science class. But yeah, it's the idea though that I've used a hacksaw. I've used, I think it's called a back saw. It's like the really thick blade. I've used, um, a hand drill, to put holes in these things, and they're just like, and then I just like put my hands in whatever's left, and I'm covered in peanut butter and jelly, and or there's cheese and ham flying all over the place, and it's just, yeah, I think that exaggeration is then able to just be scaled back pretty quickly, in the sense that they walk away with the idea that if the computer is doing something wrong, it's because somebody didn't tell it the correct thing. And I think that's just such a shift, because everything students do anymore is, in many ways automated. So to get them to understand that, these glitches, these outages that these companies have and everything, it's really a human error in some capacity. So I think they just kind of have this aha moment about, wow, like I now understand what computer science is. It's not that the computers, we're not getting into the AI components of things, but it's the idea that computers are just listening to the set of instructions given to them. Um, so I think that's one of the things where and the reason I bring it up right now as the lesson is because it's really a game changer in terms of where they kind of go with the rest of the unit, in terms of like, wow, I'm really interested in this, or I'm just still concerned for my teacher's, safety. He's like using power tools to open everyday objects, and yeah, so it's fun.
Well, that element of being dramatic, and the humor and the emotion that is going to be brought into it. I mean, it's been scientifically proven over and over again that, when emotion is attached to a moment, it goes directly into long-term memory. And so you're doing that for your kids, and they're going to remember that when their coding program, their robot, their computer is not functioning, they're going to think back to that and remember the important part of the lesson. And that is that, it follows every line of code. It follows every line of the directions. If there's a direction missing, it's not going to work. And when you can insert those moments, it's going to have a profound impact on what you're trying to do. Even if it's an extra lesson that you decide to insert into the program to really lay that foundation. When I think back to teaching writing, in fifth grade, you're getting to the point where they should be writing more detail, longer stories. It's beyond the basic beginning, middle, end. It's where you have some kids that really develop and shine as writers. And I found myself constantly saying to them, like, add more detail here, tell me more. And they just couldn't do it. They didn't know what that meant. And so I think I actually did it my first year, but I did it almost every year after that. If I didn't, I don't know where it came from, but I had all of the kids in the front of the room gathered on the carpet, and I stood behind them and I said, you all need to pay attention right now because we're about to do something for writing that will last only a split second. I had a mug full of coffee or water. They all were looking at me, and I threw it over the entire group, and it smashed into pieces on the front board. And I said, okay, we're going to write that story. And so we sat as a class writing the story, and the first iteration of it, it was one sentence. Mr. Ehrman threw a mug at the board and it exploded. And I said, we need to turn this into at least 2 paragraphs. They were so excited by it. I said, if you go home and share this sentence, nobody's going to be excited by this story. And so, that really helped spring into the idea of them thinking about something in slow motion to really break down that writing, to add those details. So it's that same idea of, when you can make kids smile and laugh, like, it is going to have a huge impact on what you're doing in your classroom and what they're remembering and what they're learning. So our last segment of the show is called the exit ticket. The same 4 questions we ask every guest every week. And Matt, I'm bringing back that question I added last week. I changed it a little bit. I think I want to add it as the 5th. So we'll see how it sticks. But question number 1, what is the best thing a teacher can do to make a student's school experience better?
I can't say it's the easiest, but just form a relationship with that student. And you're not replacing a parent or a family member or a guardian, but they spend a lot of time with us each day, and just form the best relationships you can with the students.
Absolutely. What's the best advice that you've received? And I'll adjust the question a little bit. It could be from a colleague, supervisor, or student is traditionally the answer, but it could also be from the business side when you left teaching that kind of lit you up to come back and be awesome.
I mean, I'm honestly just going to go back to my first principal that I worked for every day when she did the announcements. It was the simple saying, make it a great day. The choice is yours. I think it's, we have so much potential ourselves every day, and it's a matter of what do we do with it? What do we do with those 41 minutes 6 times a day? Some days are tougher than others, but yeah, it's our choice. It's simple but very profound in my opinion.
It really is. I heard this week listening to another podcast, and the host, they were talking about just mindset and the way you approach every day. And he said, instead of having a day where your car doesn't start and you think, oh man, my car didn't start, what a terrible day, why has this happened to me? Why not start every day thinking, wow, I can't believe my car started today. This is going to be a great day. It's the same idea.
Yeah,
the choice is yours. The way you think about every interaction you have, the way you think about every day you have, the choice really is yours, how you approach it and how you think about it. So I really do like that advice and that quote as well. So, kind of along those lines, the school year does go in waves, and we have the times of stress where it's report cards, conferences, all of these things that pile up on top of us in addition to our daily teaching responsibilities. So, in those moments when educators are struggling, what is something that you can say to them to help them power up?
Ooh, that's a good question. Yeah, I mean, I think you just need to be there for one another. Especially from the standpoint that, I look at it as I maybe have fewer students than some of my colleagues, in terms of what they see in their classrooms. Just really knowing that we're all in it together and we can support one another. And if it's a matter of I have a few extra minutes because I, get through my, um, report cards or whatever, even if it's, taking somebody's paperwork and bringing it down to the copier and making them a few more copies that they need. Yeah, I mean, I'm saying that as a 17-year vet at this point. But I was a first year teacher. We were all first year teachers at one point. And yeah, I mean, I think it's just the idea that don't be afraid to ask for help. Going back to the whole principal thing, I think that was maybe something I didn't do enough of, was ask for help. But yeah, we're really all in it together, and however we can help one another. I guarantee whatever colleague you possibly come across in the building, they've been in your shoes before. And I think sometimes we just aren't there to support each other enough.
Okay, so our new question that we're trying out here is, what do you think separates the teachers that constantly seek change, innovation, and new teaching strategies to keep their classroom fresh for students from all the rest of the teachers that kind of just accept the norm and remain stagnant in their practice?
So the question is, just to be clear, what separates the two?
Yeah. What is it about those teachers that are always seeking for more? What do they have that others don't?
Yeah, I mean, I go back to what you just mentioned, which is mindset. In terms of, I'm in year 17 and I'm doing things for the first time ever. I wasn't doing Project Invent a year ago. A year before that, I wasn't doing Amazon Future Engineer. We didn't have 3D printers in that school. The school where I was principal at for 5 years, I don't even know if we had one by the time I left there. But again, it's the idea that things change. I think back to, I was a year out of undergrad school when I went and got my master's, and like I learned HTML, and now I'm like, wow, that's like Sanskrit or something. It's just not really useful, but in many capacities it is, because I learned the nuances of computer programming. So I think it's just the idea that you're keeping up with where the world has gone, and you are bringing this mindset that today's student needs something different. I hear all the time these, and I can pull it off myself, the idea that I didn't have a cell phone when I was in middle school. I didn't have a cell phone when I was in high school. Nobody did at that point. So it's just, we're teaching a different group of students than how we, went through school ourselves. And we have to keep that in mind and change our ways to meet them, meet the students where they're at. And, yeah, I mean, things like fun and excitement and creativity, they just look different over time. It's not that the concept changes. So I think it's just the idea of, again, staying positive. I literally have this one T-shirt. It has 2 words on it. It says "Stay positive." I probably will eventually make it in every color. Because yeah, I mean, if you're not having fun, it's time to get out of the game, if you will. And yeah, I think it's just totally a mindset. I know that's not the greatest answer or the easiest one to dissect, but I think it's a mindset for sure.
Perfect. Matt, I've really enjoyed this conversation. I don't know if it's you opened with being a 4th grade teacher, you've really had a lot of experience, or just the idea that what you've expressed has been kind of this idea of everything practical. Anything that could be practical learning is practical learning in your classroom. What is a way that audience listening to this can keep in contact with you, ask further questions? I know you mentioned not being as Instagram savvy as maybe your students, but how can we kind of have a picture into your classroom and continue the conversation?
Yeah, I mean, I am pretty active on Twitter. I try to take part in Twitter chats from time to time. So I am at MDS, Matthew David Strine, MDS for the kids. So I'm on Twitter, and then our makerspace, Menneson City School District, so MCSD. Makerspace is also on Twitter. But I would say that's probably the best way. Because, believe it or not, if you Google me, you might find a superintendent that works in your half of the state with the same name, because I was once mistaken for him, and I'm like, no, I will never be a superintendent. But thanks for inviting me out to your conference today. That was awkward, yeah. But no, he was in the Shippensburg area at the time. So
Okay.
Yeah.
That's my college alma mater.
Okay, there you go, yeah.
So before we let you go and before I wrap the show up, I want to ask you one thing. I don't see it anymore, but back a while ago, I did see that you had rapper in your Twitter bio. Do you care to explain? Do you care to just rap right now, to just drop the mic on the show?
Boy.
Oh
boy.
I gotta ask.
Yeah, so I grew up and listened to rap music all the time. I do rap. I usually don't do it on the spot, because if I did, I'd probably cuss. And I really try not to do that in front of my students or on a podcast such as this. But yeah, I don't know. I've just always... Things just... I don't know. Like, you talk about things that you remember. Who doesn't remember rap? I mean, it just... So yeah, we're actually making a music studio as like one of the parts of the makerspace, because the Amazon Future Engineer, it has a component called Your Voice is Power, where the students basically remix songs. And yeah, I actually put one out there last year and told the woman who was running the program through EarSketch, I said, why can't the teachers win prizes? And next thing I know, I was the first winner of the teacher prize, and I got a gift card of, I don't know, remember what denomination, but I got a gift card to Amazon. I was like, that's pretty neat. But yeah, I did take it off. Yeah, I would rap for my staff. I've rapped for students before, like in front of 415 students, but usually I come up with it like right before I do it, and then just make sure it's clean, because yeah, not all rap music, or not much rap music.
That makes sense.
Slippery
doesn't
slope.
Doesn't have cuss words in it. So.
And I'm sure people were really confused with why a superintendent was also a rapper when they were looking at your Twitter profile. But yeah, so I've enjoyed this as well, Matthew. This has been a lot of fun learning about your journey. We appreciate your honesty and openness with us, and just telling us about how that's gone and how it's shaped you as an educator. Your school district and your kids are clearly really lucky to have you as a part of that community, developing so many great practical and realistic programs. So thanks for sharing that with us. Everything that we talked about, so I jotted down a lot of the projects and different programs that Matthew has shared during the show. All of that will be found on our website at powereduup.com/show42. So everything will be linked there for you to check out and dig into a little bit more. As always, we can be found on all social media at powereduup. And please just share this out. Please find another educator that can benefit from this show, so that we can have more educators tune in and listen to the great conversations that Mr. Rogers and I get to be a part of every week. So Matthew, thank you again. And Matt, why don't you shut this down here? I tried to think of some rap thing to say there.
It was not
I couldn't think of
not
anything.
seamless,
Nope.
but
So I just went with shutdown. I went with the classic shutdown.
leaves me off the hook for rapping on the exit as well. So, Matt, you've left us feeling powered up as we power down this episode. Everyone stay good, stay well, stay healthy, and remember what we're doing for. I love your Twitter handle. I'm like, should I just switch mine right now for the kids? That's where it's all about. So stay good, stay well, and we'll talk to you guys next week.